In the first half of our conversation with WWT co-founder and CEO Jim Kavanaugh, we explored how AI coding assistants are accelerating execution across the enterprise. But now comes the hard part. When execution speeds up, leadership decisions compress with it. AI is forcing executives to balance innovation velocity, enterprise security guardrails, and organizational stability, often all at the same time and without precedent. And if you're currently deciding how fast your organization should move with agentic AI while keeping people, risk, and strategy aligned, this episode is your leadership operating model. Just FYI, if you missed part one of this conversation, we examine how AI coding assistants are reshaping the economics of software and enterprise execution. In this second half, the focus shifts to leadership, how executives translate AI capability into organizational change across culture, governance, and decision-making. But today's conversation starts with the question many leaders are quietly asking. When technology moves faster than institutions, what must leadership change first? So let's jump in. Back maybe to the enterprise setting again here. You talk about being AI first here at WWT. There's lots of other companies out there as well that say they want to or are AI first. So far in this conversation, we've only been talking about developers, although you're talking about how you want that to extend much broader across the company. As AI starts to infiltrate all these other workflows, how have you, not how is it going to change leadership, but how has it changed your leadership style to date? Like what different motions or different leadership tactics, if any, have you had to deploy?
Yeah, I would say, one is that, fortunately, I've got a great team of leaders and, all of our employees, I think just great people that are doing a great job. So, my goal is always to kind of work myself out of a job. And so, you try to do that, but always things pop up, some issues or opportunities to go and do different things. So my point where I am now is that I do think the business is going really well. I think we've got strong leaders and we got great people and we're executing and we're growing. We just acquired SoftChoice. It was what acquisitions can be very disruptive and most of them don't work. And the acquisition of SoftChoice has been great. It's been almost a year now, and the integration of the two organizations culturally and from a people standpoint has been awesome. And then the actual traction and the growth and the synergies we're getting from the two organizations, I couldn't be happier with. And so when I look at that and I look at, how a business is going and growing overall is fantastic. And so if you look at where my time and attention, and intentionally, I've had these discussions, I haven't discussed it on a podcast so much.
Are we breaking news here?
Right, somewhat. As I've said to Mike and Sarah, and Andrew, who, spend a lot of time on the AI, very dedicated. I'm like, I could take all my time and spend it all on driving, our AI vision and our AI adoption methodology, approach internally and externally. And it would be probably the most productive and the most well-spent time that I could have. And I've told them the same thing. Now they have day jobs that they have to do, but this is the way I'm looking at it. It's so important. And, I am carving out more and more time because I think what we're doing in the specific areas around driving AI infrastructure, as I talked about, our collaboration and partnership with NVIDIA and others building that out, and then looking at the AI outcomes, which I've talked about, how important and how significant this, AI unlock of leveraging these AI coding platforms and IDEs is just going to be game changing. So to lean in and to be a thought leader with very pragmatic but aggressive approaches and methodologies in regards to how to uptrain, and upskill, IT organizations is a huge opportunity. So from my perspective, I think about this very, very differently. The last thing I would say, fortunately on behalf of Worldwide, I see all of this, my attention on what I've just described is nothing but synergistic and complementary and a multiplier effect of everything else we do, because all the things that I just described around AI infrastructure, coding platforms, developing applications and outcomes, AI outcomes and digital transformation for clients, all of those things are very connected to the IT infrastructure that we provide also. And those things come together and we can provide even better value for our clients and help them build out even a more efficient and impactful IT organization. And, the one, thing I would also say that, we've talked about this before, but it's more relevant than ever. When you look at 20 years ago and organizations or IT organizations, they wanted a seat at the table, with the executives, they wanted to be able to, have a voice, with the CEO and the board. That is so, front and center now. Boards, CEOs, they are looking at IT, they're looking at AI, they're looking at cyber, they're looking at digital transformation. These, every business is an IT business. Every business is an AI business. And so that's why I am so focused and committed to this, because I think we're in the early stages and I think the opportunity is immense, and we're going to keep charging hard here.
You talk about potentially, the foreseeable future, you leaning in more towards driving AI within, our organization. How much of that relies on you being intimately familiar with AI tools? Like, do you have to be very familiar with what the latest is from OpenAI versus Gemini versus Anthropic, so on and so forth? I see you railing out Notebook LM slides now. So, you're obviously a power user. How much about AI do you have to know to drive it for others?
You definitely, I don't have to be an expert, in using all the different tools, but personally, I'm like, I don't know how you go out and communicate with any authenticity and, just real substance unless you're willing to put the time and effort to really understand what's going on and have a passion around it. And I have a huge passion around this because I think it's so important to the company and I think it's such a massive opportunity. So do I need to be, a data scientist, which I'm not smart enough to be one, so I check that, put that aside. And do I need to be writing code and knowing all the different platforms? Probably not, but I do spend a lot of time, doing an incredible amount of research, and where I learn is from all of our smart people. Mm-hmm. And that's why, people might find me, at times I'll be kind of leading from 30,000 foot view, and other times I'll be down in the trenches. And now I'm down in the trenches because I want to know. And before I can go out and communicate confidently to the entire organization and to our customers, I want to see these tools working. And I want to know from our best and brightest what works, what doesn't work. And the tools are changing and leapfrogging each other so fast, and how to use them requires some really, really smart people. And that's what I believe we bring to our customers and our partners as we use our Advanced Technology Center, as we use our AI Proving Ground, we use our cyber range. These are things that, the doctor has his hand in the patient. The doctor is actually operating. The engineers are working, hand in hand with a collective group of really, really talented people to be able to bring that expertise, not just in one specific area, but across an enterprise to our customers. And that I find incredibly helpful. So when we can go in, and personally, when I can go in and, have discussions with executives and CEOs and do it with a real understanding mm-hmm. and a real level of confidence that we can bring these capabilities and real value to them and kind of guide them to what I think they should be doing and investing, that makes me feel good. because the last thing I'm going to do is go in and guess at
Right.
this. And so no, and I find it fun too. I find it, to be very enjoyable and to connect with, our employees and see individuals that, even in our coding offsite last week, there were a couple individuals that they were just like, it was like a kid on Christmas, it was like giddy. It was like so happy to literally go through, some of the things that they were doing. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's, to see that kind of passion and energy. And it really validates that the individual, a very bright individual, was like, how amazed some of the things are that they're figuring out and they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just speaks to, you get excited, that starts building momentum, and that starts cranking the flywheel one by one, and then eventually by an organization. Maybe another question along the same lines of kind of what AI are you using, but so much of integrating AI into workflows relies on that quote unquote unlearning your historical processes and starting to build them back up with kind of an AI forward mindset. Have you taken that approach with your role as a CEO, or any role that you have for that matter? What have you unlearned about yourself or your processes, and how have you started to put AI into it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The piece around, I would say, unlearning, if there are habits or things that you're doing that just don't make sense any longer, I think, you need to think about that. If you were managing or leading people in a way that, just doesn't make sense, I think you need to think about those types of things. I mean, there's still a lot of opinion, if I look right now, just in regards to hybrid work. Should you mandate everybody comes back in the office? Some people do. I don't. I think there is, a lot of, very, very important reasons that we need to bring people back together at certain times culturally in collaboration. But the way that we work, we have employees all over the world, and employees aren't in any one specific location. And we are all collaborating with people all over the country and all over the world all the time. And so I think, how you look at it, if you're talking about unlearning, my view is when, co-founded Worldwide back in 1990, my view was I'm going to be the first one in and the last one out every day. And I am going to work, and that's just the way it is. And you come in and you show up, and I would look, whose car's in the parking lot and when did they get in? And I mean, it's just, now I've matured over the years. So, but I'll just tell you, I mean, this is the way it was. I mean, you need to grind, you need to be willing to grind it out, and you need to put that time in. And, and I told leaders, Joe Koenig and Tom Strunk, if you're going to come in, I knew, we both played soccer together. I said, you guys are going to have to lead by example. You're going to be scrutinized because you know me, and and we got to lead by example. First in, last out, be willing to do whatever it takes, work weekends, nights, you name it, go sweep the floors, doesn't make any difference. But now, where we are in the size of the company, I'm like, that's not the way it operates. I still expect, if you want to be great, you don't work like the average individual. Mm-hmm. If you want to do something special, you've got to be willing to put that time in. But the way that you lead and operate an organization, and like what we have worldwide here, I know there's people that bust their butt. And so you got to create an environment where they feel connected, they feel engaged, they feel like they're part of the team, and they want to work hard because that's who they are, and they feel like they've been treated, and they bring that passion. And I know we've got people all over the place that, they work long hours, and they'll work at night, and they'll work different things. But it's not my job to babysit, everybody. If they need to go do something with their kids, take them somewhere, they do that. So talking about like kind of relearning, I think that's just something, it's not just an AI thing. Mm-hmm. It's as we all continue to grow and evolve, and there's just different ways to run different businesses. People can decide how they want to do it. It just so happens to be that's the way that I look at it. And oh, by the way, it's not just my decision. I'll run this by all the executive team, and I'll run it by all of our employees. And I think I'd have a revolt if we came back and we said, and again, I don't think it would create more productivity. I think it would create more angst. So when I look at that as kind of an example of the question you asked, I think it applies also to this massive transformation around AI. There are going to be times that things are going to change in the way that we learn and the way that we collaborate and interact are going to change. And, we need to think about those things and think about what's the most effective way to do it, even if it means you need to change the way that you used to operate, So, and that's where I think it comes back to being a lifelong learner and being willing to adapt and change.
We were talking about embracing change. Last time you were on the podcast, I want to say it was 4 or 5 months ago, maybe. For those out there, if you haven't checked it out, definitely go listen because it was a fantastic episode. But I asked you somewhat point blank, but you mostly identified the question, which was how do you grapple with the concept of people out there that have fear of AI replacing their job? And at the time you said, it's about embracing change and it's about continuous learning. And we've heard a little bit about what you've mentioned now about if you don't keep up, you're going to put yourself at risk. It's not a threat. It's just the reality of the situation. How has your thought on kind of that idea of employees being nervous about AI replacing what they do, maybe beyond if you don't adapt, you'll put yourself at risk? How has that changed?
It really hasn't. I think it's still, a topic and something that people are thinking about, and I really don't change my perspective on that. We don't know how things are going to play out exactly, but I can tell you, to date, we, if anything, we're adding more people, and we are a growth company. So the intent is to upskill all of our, employees and continue to look at how the work environment is changing and look for opportunities to take talented employees to continue to grow the business. But I will say just, from a macro perspective, you got to be realistic as a leader. When change is, as a leader, when you go out, and I say this all the time, is you're the leader and you're rolling down change and you're telling everybody to be comfortable and don't worry about it. I'm like, no, flip it around, make the CEO change. And all of a sudden, I'm human just like everybody else. There's a level of angst that goes with that. And you're like, oh, what does that mean? And so I think just having an appreciation and being transparent, with everybody that, yeah, I understand, we're all, human and, we're just trying to figure this out. So I think that's just one piece of it. And then I think the other is continuing to be as honest and transparent as things continue to evolve. And communicating that with your employees of how that is looking, how things are changing, or are there anything just are really, transformational material to the organization. But it doesn't change the fact that in the world that we're in today, I truly believe companies that are going to survive and thrive are going to be ones with leadership and with organizations that know how to adapt a change and learn. It's not going to be the one that is the best AI company today or the best digital company. It's going to be the company that has the leadership and a culture that understands how to adapt, change, and take advantage of opportunities as they move forward. And that is different than understanding, being a subject matter expert in a specific technology. That's more of a cultural and a leadership thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Jim, this is the last question I have for you. I'm going to read a little bit here. This is a quote from your friend, Jeetu Patel, Cisco president. He mentioned this because he was a guest of yours at the summit that you mentioned last week. But he wrote this in a LinkedIn post. The absence of irrationality in our ambition might end up becoming our biggest limiter in the next wave of human evolution in the AI era. Okay, so he's talking about you need to have irrational ambition right now to kind of grow. He's talking, 10, 20x. Let's get a little irrational here.
He's saying that you need to be irrational.
Yeah, you need to have an irrational sense of ambition to be the top of the top in the future. What is doesn't have to be super irrational, but what is the ambition that you have for not just WWT, but the industry in general as it relates to taking advantage of AI?
Yeah, knowing G2, who is a great guy and very smart and is leaning into AI in a big way. If based on the statement that you just mentioned, I think what he's saying, and I would have to agree with it. I'll talk to him about it and just. But I think what he's saying is that the opportunity with AI is so significant, and the potential is so massive that none of us really know what that opportunity is and what's behind door number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I think he's saying that you need to think big and you need to be bold. And if you're thinking the way that you the way that you used to think, just in regards to kind of like these step changes is the way it works, you're potentially going to miss out on a big opportunity. That's what I think, knowing G2, that he's like, there may be some benefit. And this is where I think there's a bit of art and science. If I'm, going on about the statement he had, there's an art and science of like pushing the team, and maybe it's in, like we talked about, things around governance and security, taking certain areas and being really, really bold, not potentially betting the business or taking an area that, if you miss, you're gonna, you're just gonna cut the business in half.
Right.
You're gonna really cripple the company. The opportunity is, how do you actually be aggressive, grow the business, do the things you need to do, but do understand the opportunity is so significant and so big that you may need to get in with a group and think a bit irrationally and think bigger than that's not even possible. That could never happen. And it's like, I agree. I think that's a fascinating statement and an approach. And I agree, if it's not the entire plan. Sure. If the entire plan was around, let's be irrational. No. And I know that's not what he's saying. Yeah. And he would be like, of course. But tell him I said that. He was, I will. But no, I think it's a really, really insightful view. That being irrational today and placing big bets on some things and getting people to think about it is not completely irrational. It is, because the models may end up actually delivering more than what you were actually thinking irrationally. They may actually overachieve that. Yeah.
I mean, put the pieces in place, get the guardrails there, and that really allow you to go accomplish that irrational feat. It's fun fodder to kind of end an episode on. Jim,
it's a good way to do it.
Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us on another episode. We'll have you on again soon, I'm sure.
My pleasure, and glad. I'd just like to say I'm happy I made it twice now. I mean,
two-timer.
Two-timer, and
we'll have to start making jackets.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it.
Thanks again, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again to Jim for joining us here in the studio. It's clear that AI is accelerating execution, but the real transformation happens in how organizations make those decisions. The lesson isn't to move faster, it's to become clear about priorities, about risk, and about the future you're actually trying to create. This episode of the AI Proving Ground podcast was co-produced by Naz Baker and Kara Kood. Our audio and video engineer is John Knobloch. My name is Brian Felt. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.